A well-known billionaire dies suddenly, and everything inside his mansion changes from one day to the next. His wife steps forward and says she knows exactly who is responsible. She points to the housekeeper, a woman who worked for the family for years, and claims that the quiet employee is the one behind his death. The accusation spreads quickly inside the courtroom, and people start paying attention to every move, every word, and every expression. The housekeeper struggles to understand how her life changed so fast, and she tries to explain that she would never harm the man she served for so long, but the pressure keeps growing, and each hearing becomes more intense than the last. Then something unexpected happens. The billionaire's young daughter, who is autistic and uses a wheelchair, is brought into the courtroom. She has always been a quiet child, someone who observes more than she speaks, and many believe she might not understand what is happening. But the moment she appears, the atmosphere in the room changes. Lawyers, judges, and reporters turn their attention to her, waiting to see why she has been called. No one knows what she will reveal, but everyone can feel that her presence is important, and that the truth may be very different from what people assumed. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. The Whitmore Mansion had once been a place full of movement, visitors, and grand celebrations, but now it stayed quiet most of the time. The long hallways no longer echoed with parties or important meetings, because Jonathan Whitmore chose a calm life for the sake of his daughter, Emily. He preferred quiet days, steady routines, and a peaceful environment where she could feel safe. Jonathan had built his entire fortune through years of hard work and successful projects, but none of that mattered to him as much as raising Emily after losing his wife during childbirth. The silence in the mansion was not sad, but intentional, as if he wanted to protect Emily from anything that might overwhelm her. She spent most of her days surrounded by familiar rooms, familiar sounds, and the stable presence of her father. Each day was predictable, and Jonathan believed this stability helped her feel more comfortable in a world that could be confusing and loud. In those moments, the mansion became more than a luxurious home. It became a shelter where he tried to give Emily the best life he could within the limits of her needs and his own fears of losing what little family he had left. Emily's life inside the mansion followed a slow and organized schedule, created carefully by Jonathan to support her development and comfort. She had therapy sessions that helped her communication and mobility, all adapted to her being autistic and using a wheelchair. Tutors came to the house to teach her at a pace suited to her, avoiding crowded spaces or noisy environments that might cause her distress. After lessons, she usually spent her afternoons near Jonathan, staying close to him whether they were in the study, the garden, or the quiet living room. She enjoyed watching him work or listening to him explain simple things about his projects, even if she did not always respond in ways other children might. Jonathan never expected more from her than what she could give. He simply valued being near her. Some days they shared short conversations, other days they sat in silence, but these moments created a bond stronger than anything else in Jonathan's life. He arranged everything so Emily never felt pressured, rushed, or frightened, and he took pride in the small progress she made over time. This steady rhythm shaped both of their lives, giving them a sense of stability that Jonathan believed would last for many years. This quiet routine began to change the day Jonathan met Vanessa Carter, a woman who immediately stood out in any room she entered. She was confident, glamorous, and seemed genuinely impressed by Jonathan's achievements when they first spoke. Jonathan was not used to receiving such enthusiastic attention, especially after spending so many years focused only on his daughter and his work. Vanessa complimented his ideas, asked thoughtful questions, and made him feel interesting again in ways he had not felt for a long time. She appeared fascinated by the lifestyle he had built and by the dedication he showed to Emily. Her presence was different from the calm atmosphere of the mansion, but Jonathan found it refreshing rather than disruptive. Vanessa showed excitement about the possibility of getting to know both him and his daughter better. Although Jonathan was cautious, he slowly allowed himself to believe that someone new entering his life could be a positive change. He thought it might even bring some balance to the solitary routine he and Emily shared. His first impression of Vanessa was that she cared, or at least wanted to care, about the things that mattered most to him. Vanessa's interest in Emily appeared almost immediately, and Jonathan felt hopeful about it. When Vanessa visited for the first time, she bent down beside Emily's wheelchair, spoke gently to her, and treated her as though she were an important part of Jonathan's life rather than an obstacle. Emily did not react strongly, but she also did not show discomfort, which Jonathan took as a positive sign. Encouraged by this, Vanessa continued trying to interact with the girl every time she visited. She asked about Emily's routines, therapies, and favorite activities, and Jonathan interpreted these questions as a sign that Vanessa wanted to fit into their world. He appreciated the effort, even if Emily remained reserved. Vanessa complimented the mansion, the staff, and the way Jonathan cared for his daughter, always using warm words that made him feel understood. The attention she gave him and Emily made it easier for Jonathan to open the door for more visits. Over time, it became normal to find Vanessa in the living room or garden, talking with Jonathan while Emily stayed nearby. Jonathan believed he had found someone willing to accept his life the way it was, and that belief made him lower the guards he had held up for so many years. As weeks turned into months, Vanessa's presence in the mansion grew more constant. What started as occasional visits soon became regular appearances. She would arrive early in the day, offering to help with simple tasks or suggesting new ideas to brighten the house. She spoke with the staff, commented on the decoration, and acted as if she belonged there even before Jonathan officially asked her to. Jonathan, wanting to give Emily a sense of normality and maybe even a family-like atmosphere, allowed these changes to happen gradually. He did not notice at first how often Vanessa inserted herself into decisions regarding the house, or how she slowly adjusted the environment to her own preferences. Emily observed these changes quietly from her wheelchair, following the movements around her without saying much. Jonathan believed Vanessa's involvement showed affection and commitment, and this belief overshadowed some of the small tensions that started to appear. Even when Vanessa's voice became more commanding, or when she made decisions without consulting him, Jonathan convinced himself that she only wanted to help. The more present Vanessa became, the more the mansion's atmosphere shifted from the peaceful isolation it once had to a place filled with her energy and opinions. Eventually, Vanessa's influence reached a point where her presence felt unavoidable. She settled into the mansion as if she had always lived there, choosing rooms for herself, giving suggestions about Emily's routines, and acting like a central figure in both their lives. Jonathan, overwhelmed by the mixture of loneliness, hope, and admiration he felt, allowed himself to believe that marrying her would make his family feel complete again. When Vanessa became his new wife, she did not hide her satisfaction. She moved through the mansion with confidence, taking her place beside him in every situation. Emily watched this shift quietly, as she did with most things, while Jonathan tried to convince himself that he had made the right decision for all of them. The mansion no longer felt like the quiet sanctuary it once was, but Jonathan hoped that the change would bring stability, companionship, and perhaps even progress for Emily. He believed Vanessa would help them build a future together, unaware of the subtle ways she had already changed the dynamics of their home. The chapter closed with Vanessa fully integrated into their lives, her presence now shaping the environment where Emily and Jonathan once lived in peaceful routine. The marriage brought changes to the mansion, But Amanda Lewis continued her daily work with the same dedication she had shown for years. She woke early, organized the rooms, kept every corner of the house clean, and made sure everything functioned smoothly. Amanda moved quietly through the halls, respecting the family's privacy, yet always staying close enough to help Emily when needed. Emily trusted her, and Amanda understood the girl's routines better than anyone except Jonathan. She knew what calmed her, what caused discomfort, and how to adjust activities so Emily felt safe. Even with the new wife living in the mansion, Amanda stayed focused on her duties, telling herself that her main responsibility was to maintain the house and protect the girl's comfort. Still, she noticed that the atmosphere was not the same anymore. She felt the change in how people walked, how they spoke, and how silence seemed heavier. But Amanda kept her thoughts to herself, believing that her place was to work quietly, not to question the new dynamics brought by the marriage. As days passed, Amanda became more aware of Vanessa's behavior, especially the way she acted when Jonathan was not around. Amanda had known many people over her years of service and could easily recognize shifts in tone or attitude. She noticed how Vanessa's mood changed quickly, as if she could turn warm in one moment and cold the next. The most troubling thing for Amanda was how Vanessa behaved toward Emily when they were alone. The softness in her voice disappeared, replaced by impatience or complete lack of interest. She did not speak kindly to the girl, nor did she try to offer comfort the way Jonathan believed she did. Amanda watched these moments quietly, always trying to stay close enough to support Emily without drawing Vanessa's anger. She understood that saying something directly could create conflict, and Amanda did not want to risk her job or worsen the situation inside the mansion. But she took mental notes, aware that the new wife was not as caring as she pretended to be. Vanessa avoided interacting with Amanda whenever possible. Even small questions, like whether she preferred a room arranged in a certain way or if she needed anything cleaned, were met with short answers. Sometimes Vanessa responded with a cold stare or acted as if Amanda had interrupted something important. Amanda tried to remain professional, but she could not ignore the growing distance. Vanessa seemed bothered by her presence, as if viewing Amanda not as part of the household staff, but as someone she needed to keep away. Jonathan did not notice these interactions, since Vanessa behaved differently when he was nearby. But Amanda experienced the tension directly. She kept her tone polite and limited conversations to practical matters, hoping to avoid misunderstandings. The more she watched Vanessa's distant behavior, the more she understood that the new wife did not want her involved in anything beyond basic chores. Amanda respected the boundary, though she felt a quiet uneasiness each time Vanessa looked at her with suspicion, as if expecting her to interfere in something she was not meant to see. Despite the tension with Vanessa, Emily continued to find comfort in Amanda's presence. Whenever Amanda was nearby, the girl relaxed, responding in her own way to the gentle care she had always received from her. Amanda noticed how Emily reacted differently depending on who was around. With Vanessa, she grew still and tense, avoiding eye contact and staying silent. But with Amanda, she loosened her shoulders, accepted small gestures of help, and sometimes lifted her hand as if asking to be guided. Amanda made sure to give Emily simple words of reassurance, even if Vanessa was watching from a distance. She brought her blankets when she looked cold, adjusted her wheelchair when she seemed uncomfortable, and kept her company during long afternoons. These small actions helped Emily maintain some sense of stability in a house that suddenly felt different. Amanda understood that Emily relied on familiarity to feel safe, so she tried to keep routines steady, even when Vanessa changed the overall atmosphere of the mansion. Emily's trust gave Amanda strength to continue working calmly, no matter how strained things became. As Vanessa settled more deeply into her role as Jonathan's wife, the atmosphere inside the mansion shifted into something Amanda could feel even without hearing a word. The once calm rooms now carried a kind of quiet tension that lingered in small daily moments. A passing glance from Vanessa, a sudden silence when she entered a room, or the sharp tone in her voice all contributed to an environment that felt heavier than before. Amanda noticed the staff speaking less, avoiding questions and keeping their heads down during work. She knew they felt the same shift she did, but no one wanted to comment openly. Amanda chose to stay neutral, performing her duties without complaint. She believed that reacting to Vanessa's behavior would only create unnecessary problems for the household, and she did not want to contribute to any rising conflict. Besides, she worried that speaking up might put her position at risk, and she needed her job to support herself. So she focused on Emily, the cleanliness of the home, and the tasks she had performed faithfully for years. Even as the tension grew, Amanda reminded herself that her role in the mansion was to maintain order, not to challenge the family's decisions. She swept floors, washed linens, organized the pantry, and continued caring for Emily with the same steady kindness. She tried to ignore Vanessa's cold remarks or distant expressions, telling herself that emotions did not belong in her work. Still, she could not help but feel protective of Emily, who seemed more withdrawn since Vanessa arrived. Amanda noticed the change clearly, but kept her reaction hidden. She believed the best way to avoid trouble was to stay silent and patient, hoping that things would calm down over time. Even though the peace of the mansion had been replaced by an uneasy quiet, Amanda chose to keep her focus on her duties. She hoped that if she remained discreet and calm, she could prevent the tension from growing into something worse. For now, her goal was simple: continue working, stay near Emily, and avoid creating problems inside the house. As the weeks went by, Vanessa slowly took control of the family's routine. At first, her actions seemed like simple suggestions, but soon she began making decisions without asking anyone. She planned small events inside the mansion, changed the order of daily tasks, and gave instructions as if everything belonged to her. She created new rules about how things should be done, including what time certain rooms could be used and who could enter them. Amanda felt the changes immediately, especially when Vanessa told her she was no longer allowed in some parts of the house unless she had permission. The mansion, which Amanda once moved through freely to complete her work, now felt divided. Jonathan noticed the shift in the household, but he believed it was normal after a recent marriage, and thought Vanessa was only trying to organize things. He did not want to create conflict, so he accepted her explanations without much questioning. Emily watched all of this from her wheelchair, paying attention to each detail, even though no one realized how much she understood. The house, once calm, now followed Vanessa's pattern, and everyone adjusted their actions to her preferences, whether they liked it or not. Emily observed her stepmother closely, picking up on behaviors that others seemed too distracted to notice. Vanessa never acted openly aggressive when Jonathan was near, but when she was alone with Emily, her tone changed. She removed the girls' toys without giving a reason, placing them in places Emily could not reach. She corrected Emily's movements, sometimes grabbing the wheelchair handles too firmly or speaking with impatience. Whenever Emily wanted to spend time with Amanda, Vanessa found excuses to reduce those moments, saying she needed Amanda elsewhere or that Emily should stay in her room. Emily did not express her discomfort with words, but she felt it deeply. She noticed the difference between the calm moments she used to share with Amanda and the tense situations that happened when Vanessa was in charge. Though she rarely spoke, Emily's mind recorded each gesture, each unpleasant look, and every small action that made her feel pushed aside. She processed these moments internally, understanding more than people assumed. The mansion felt different to her, less warm and more controlled, and she could feel the change even if she did not have the words to describe it. Amanda sensed that something was wrong, but felt powerless to interfere. The new restrictions made her work harder, and the time she spent near Emily kept getting shorter. She would pass by the girls' room and see Emily sitting quietly, her eyes following Vanessa's movements with caution. Amanda wanted to offer comfort, but Vanessa always seemed to find a reason to keep her away. She limited Amanda's access not only to certain rooms, but also to daily interactions with the child, which had once been natural and frequent. Amanda missed the simple moments of helping Emily feel safe, but she knew opposing Vanessa could cause problems that might lead to her losing her job entirely. For that reason, she followed instructions even when they felt unfair. She tried to stay patient, hoping things would calm down eventually. Meanwhile, Jonathan noticed Amanda's reduced presence around Emily, but assumed Vanessa was simply organizing the staff in a more structured way. He did not imagine the tension growing between the two women or how deeply these changes affected Emily. Amanda continued working quietly, watching everything from a distance and waiting for a moment when she could safely support the girl again. Jonathan began experiencing strange symptoms that worried him, though he tried not to make them a priority. He felt tired more often than usual, sometimes needing to rest during times he would normally be active. Waves of nausea appeared without explanation, leaving him weak and unable to focus. He assumed it was stress from the marriage, combined with the responsibility of balancing his work and family life. Jonathan had always pushed himself to take care of everything, so he believed the exhaustion was simply a result of overworking. He did not think the problems were serious enough to seek help and reassured himself that a few days of rest would solve everything. Vanessa, when he mentioned feeling unwell, acted concerned and caring. She suggested he calm down, take breaks, and let her handle more responsibilities. Her voice softened whenever he spoke about his health, and she stayed close to him, offering comfort. To Jonathan, her concern seemed genuine and made him feel supported, even though the rest of the house did not feel the same. He tried to ignore the discomfort and assumed life would return to normal soon. While Jonathan struggled with his symptoms, Vanessa moved through the mansion with confidence. She acted calm and collected, maintaining a smooth routine that made it appear she had everything under control. Whenever Jonathan was in the room, she spoke kindly, kept her gestures gentle, and appeared attentive to both him and Emily. Her behavior seemed carefully prepared so that he saw her in the best possible light. But when he stepped away, Vanessa's tone shifted. She became colder, quicker with her instructions, and less patient with anyone who questioned her decisions. Her ability to change behavior depending on who was present made it almost impossible for Jonathan to suspect anything. To him, she appeared supportive and dependable during a difficult time. To Emily and Amanda, the difference was clear, even if they could not speak openly about it. Vanessa continued to shape the household according to her desires, using her calm exterior to mask her harsher side. Jonathan accepted the image she presented, unaware that the quiet tension around him was not just the result of a new marriage, but something far more complicated. In the middle of these changes, the mansion felt different for everyone living in it. Emily grew quieter, keeping her observations to herself, while Amanda continued working under new restrictions that made her role more limited than before. Vanessa kept control of almost every detail, deciding who could be where and what they could do. Jonathan's growing weakness only made it easier for her to take the lead, as he no longer had the energy to question the changes happening around him. The atmosphere in the house became heavier, not because of loud conflicts, but because of silent ones. Every person felt the shift in their own way, adjusting to Vanessa's rules and trying to avoid tension. Amanda stayed focused on her job, Emily watched everything with careful eyes, and Jonathan tried to ignore his fatigue, hoping things would stabilize. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept her behavior balanced between calm charm and hidden aggression, shaping the family routine exactly how she wanted. No one spoke openly about their worries, but the quiet discomfort spread through the mansion day by day, signaling a deeper problem that none of them could fully describe yet. Jonathan was found unconscious in his office on a day that began like any other inside the mansion. The staff expected their usual routines, and Amanda went about her work as she always did. But everything changed the moment someone noticed Jonathan lying motionless on the floor. Vanessa reacted immediately, running through the halls and shouting for help as if she had just discovered the most terrifying scene of her life. Her voice echoed through the house as she cried that her husband was not breathing. She grabbed the phone and called emergency services, speaking in a desperate tone that drew everyone's attention. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and examined Jonathan where he lay. Their expressions grew serious, and they began to discuss signs that suggested poisoning. Amanda stood nearby, shocked and confused, trying to understand how Jonathan could have reached such a state so suddenly. The situation quickly turned chaotic as more people appeared, whispering and watching with worry. Jonathan, who had once been the center of the household, now lay still, his fate decided before most of the staff even grasped what was happening. The entire mansion felt different, as if the moment had pulled the air out of every room and left behind only shock and uncertainty. When the doctors announced their initial findings, the silence was broken by Vanessa's loud cries. She acted devastated, repeating that she could not understand how this could have happened. Right there, in front of everyone, she pointed out that Amanda had full access to the kitchen, the food, and Jonathan's daily meals. Her words were sharp, and they caught the attention of every person standing in the hall. Amanda froze, unable to believe what she was hearing. Vanessa did not hesitate. She continued insisting that someone who worked so closely with the food should at least be questioned thoroughly. Her voice trembled in a dramatic way, making it seem like she was terrified of the idea that someone inside the house could have harmed her husband. Amanda knew the accusation was unfair, yet she struggled to respond. The shock of Jonathan's death was already overwhelming, and now she had to listen to Vanessa suggest she was involved. She felt her heart pounding as the weight of Vanessa's words sank in. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the moment felt too heavy and confusing for her to find the right words. The mansion, filled with people who had known her for years, now looked at her with uncertainty instead of trust. Amanda's panic grew as officers arrived and began securing the area. The police moved through the mansion with a serious tone, ordering staff members to stay in specific rooms while they inspected the office. Amanda watched them place tape around the doorway, collect objects, and question people individually. She answered every question as clearly as she could, explaining her daily routine and insisting she never had a reason to harm Jonathan. But she could see that Vanessa's earlier accusation had already influenced their approach. They asked her more questions than the others, taking notes with stern expressions. Meanwhile, the other staff members avoided looking at her directly, unsure of what to think. Amanda felt isolated, even though she stood in the middle of the house she had faithfully cared for. She tried to stay calm, focusing on the fact that she had done nothing wrong, but the fear grew stronger with every passing minute, especially when she noticed Vanessa watching her from a distance with an expression that was difficult to read, something between sorrow and accusation. Amanda hoped the truth would come out soon, yet she felt helpless against the situation that was quickly forming around her. While investigators continued questioning everyone, Emily sat quietly in the living room, her wheelchair positioned where she had a clear view of the hallway. She did not speak, but she observed everything with silent attention. She watched the movement of police officers, the worried faces of the staff, and the dramatic behavior of Vanessa. Emily noticed how Vanessa cried loudly, repeating the same lines again and again. as if making sure everyone heard her distress. The child did not react outwardly, but inside she tried to understand the sudden change in the house. She had seen Jonathan weak in the weeks before, and now she was watching the aftermath of his final moments. Emily's eyes followed Vanessa each time she walked past, studying her expressions and the way she exaggerated her sobs when others were near. Nobody asked Emily what she had seen or felt, assuming she did not understand enough to be helpful. Still, she continued to observe everything, storing each detail in her mind. Her silence, already a natural part of her behavior, made her presence almost invisible to the adults, who were too distracted to notice her careful attention. With Jonathan's sudden absence, the mansion felt heavier than ever. Every room carried a sense of loss, and every worker moved quietly, trying not to disturb the tense atmosphere. The person who once made decisions and kept order was gone, leaving behind uncertainty and grief. Vanessa kept herself in the center of the situation, crying loudly whenever someone passed by, placing a hand on her chest as if she might faint from sorrow. Yet her dramatic behavior did not match the tension she created earlier with her accusation against Amanda. The contrast made the staff uneasy, but no one dared to question her. Amanda, still in shock, tried to explain to anyone who would listen that she would never harm Jonathan. She spoke with trembling hands, repeating that she had worked for him for years and cared deeply for the family. But the people around her seemed afraid to take sides, especially with police officers walking through the halls. Amanda stood alone, feeling the weight of suspicion, even though she knew she was innocent. The house she once knew as a place of routine and stability now felt like a trap closing around her. As the day continued, police activity filled the mansion. Officers carried bags of collected items, asked additional questions, and took statements from everyone on the staff. Amanda felt drained from repeating her story, yet she kept saying the truth each time. Vanessa stayed in the living room or near the staircase, always within sight of others, crying and speaking about Jonathan with a tone that sounded rehearsed. Emily stayed in her wheelchair, her eyes following every sound and movement. She seemed calm on the outside, but her attention never wavered. She watched Vanessa's exaggerated expressions, Amanda's distress, and the officers who moved through the space. Emily understood more than anyone realized, but she remained as silent as ever. The mansion carried a deep sadness, mixed with fear and confusion. Everyone felt the impact of the sudden loss, but Amanda felt the burden most heavily as she struggled to defend herself in an environment where no one seemed willing to truly listen. The day ended with more questions than answers, and the house remained under a cloud of suspicion, grief, and uncertainty. Amanda was taken in for formal questioning soon after the investigation intensified, and the experience became more frightening than anything she had faced before. At the police station, she sat across from detectives who spoke in firm, unyielding voices, insisting that parts of her statements did not match. They repeated questions again and again, trying to catch her in contradictions that did not exist. Each time she answered, they claimed her words sounded uncertain or incomplete, even though she tried to explain everything as clearly as she could. Amanda felt overwhelmed, struggling to understand why they refused to believe her. She described her routines, her years of loyalty to the family, and her shock over Jonathan's death, but none of it seemed to soften the suspicion directed at her. The room felt smaller with every passing minute as the pressure grew. Her hands shook and tears rolled down her cheeks as she tried to defend herself. She wished someone would see how terrified she was, not because she was guilty, but because she felt trapped in a situation where her truth held no weight. The detectives wrote down each of her responses, but their expressions showed they had already decided who they believed. While Amanda faced relentless questioning, Vanessa provided her own statements to the police, and her words carried a tone of confidence that influenced the direction of the investigation. She described events in a way that placed her in a favorable light, while subtly pointing out reasons to distrust Amanda. She claimed the employee had shown resentment in the past, suggesting that Amanda held hidden frustrations or jealousy. Vanessa also mentioned moments she described as strange behavior, even though these situations had never existed. Her calm manner and detailed storytelling made her seem credible to the investigators. She cried at the right moments, lowered her voice when speaking about Jonathan, and insisted she wanted justice for her husband. The detectives listened carefully, taking notes and nodding as if her version of the story made perfect sense. She positioned herself as a grieving widow surrounded by danger, emphasizing how vulnerable she felt after Jonathan's death. The contrast between Amanda's emotional breakdown and Vanessa's composed narrative only pushed suspicion further toward the longtime employee. Amanda had no idea how strongly Vanessa's statements were affecting the case. While all this happened, Emily remained inside the mansion, now cared for by a nurse hired in a hurry. The new presence felt strange to her, as the nurse tried to manage her routine without truly understanding her needs. Emily watched quietly as people moved around her, speaking in rushed voices and making decisions she could not follow. She felt the absence of Amanda deeply, since Amanda had always been the one who understood her gestures and silences. The new nurse did not know how to read her expressions or which small actions helped her feel calm. Emily tried to observe everything around her, hoping to make sense of the sudden changes in the house. She noticed Vanessa moving from room to room, always talking on the phone or meeting with investigators, and she sensed that Vanessa's behavior had shifted again now that Jonathan was gone. Emily processed these things in her own quiet way, assigning meaning to the tone of voices, the rhythm of footsteps, and the tension that filled the rooms. Even though no one asked for her version of events, she noticed details adults overlooked. But she had no words to explain any of it, so she remained silent. Meanwhile, Amanda's situation worsened as the investigation gained public attention. Local news outlets began reporting on the case, turning it into a spectacle that drew curiosity and judgment from people who knew nothing about her. Reporters gathered outside the mansion and the police station, repeating claims that matched Vanessa's version of events. They described Amanda as the main suspect, highlighting her access to the kitchen and her proximity to Jonathan during his final days. The stories ignored her years of loyalty and replaced them with speculation meant to entertain viewers. Amanda felt crushed each time she heard how the media portrayed her. She knew she had done nothing wrong, but she could not fight the force of public opinion. The weight of being labeled a suspect, especially when she was innocent, made her feel powerless. She wondered how quickly a person's entire life could be destroyed, not by actions they committed, but by stories others chose to tell. The world outside saw only headlines, not the suffering of someone who had been accused without proof. Amanda feared that the more people believed the false narrative, the harder it would be for her to clear her name. Every new interrogation left Amanda more exhausted and fragile. She cried often during questioning, struggling to speak through her fear and frustration. She repeated her innocence again and again, insisting she would never harm Jonathan. She tried to direct attention toward Vanessa's strange behavior, hoping someone would notice the parts of the story that did not make sense. But the detectives dismissed her comments as attempts to shift blame. They focused solely on what they believed were inconsistencies in her statements, ignoring any possibility that someone else might be responsible. Their questions grew harsher, and their tone made it clear they saw her as the obvious suspect. Amanda felt as though she was shouting into a void, begging for someone to listen, while realizing that every word she said only seemed to deepen their suspicion. Her heart ached, not only because of the accusations, but because she had lost the family she had served for years. She felt abandoned, frightened, and completely alone in a situation she could not control. Despite Amanda's pleas, the authorities seemed firmly convinced they had found the culprit. Their confidence left little room for doubt or further investigation. They relied heavily on Vanessa's testimony and the circumstances surrounding Amanda's access to the kitchen, treating these details as undeniable evidence. The detectives appeared uninterested in exploring other possibilities, focusing instead on building a stronger case against Amanda. Inside the mansion, Vanessa maintained her calm demeanor, continuing to present herself as the grieving widow, suffering from betrayal. Emily remained silent, observing everything from a distance, understanding far more than anyone realized. The case moved forward with an unfair certainty, and Amanda's truth was overshadowed by assumptions that suited the narrative forming around her. With no one willing to hear her side properly, she faced the painful reality that she might be blamed for something she had never done. The mansion, once full of order and familiar routines, now stood as the center of a tragedy and misunderstanding that threatened to destroy the life of the one person who had always cared for it with genuine loyalty. Amanda was formally taken to court as the next step in the process, and the situation felt heavier than anything she had endured before. The courthouse was filled with people who whispered about the case as she walked past, their eyes following her as if she were already guilty. Newspapers displayed headlines that repeated the same idea again and again, reinforcing the public belief that the employee was responsible for Jonathan's death. Amanda could not escape the feeling that every stranger had an opinion about her, even though none of them knew her or the truth. She entered the courtroom trembling, trying to stay calm while facing a system that already seemed biased against her. The atmosphere was overwhelming, with reporters waiting outside, officers guiding her through the halls, and curious onlookers filling the benches. Amanda felt small, surrounded by people who only saw the image crafted by the media. She knew this trial would decide her future, and the fear of being punished for something she had never done made it hard for her to breathe. Her hands shook as she sat down, waiting for the session to begin, hoping for a chance to defend herself, even though she feared her voice would be ignored once again. Emily was present too, though she remained at a distance. Judicial assistants guided her through the courthouse halls, pushing her wheelchair slowly while trying to shield her from the noise. She looked around with confusion, unsure of what all the movement and voices meant. The courthouse was loud and unfamiliar, filled with echoes, footsteps, and hurried conversations. Emily watched Amanda from afar, recognizing the fear on her face, even if she could not fully understand all the details of the trial. She also saw Vanessa standing nearby, dressed perfectly and surrounded by people who seemed eager to hear her words. Emily processed these images quietly, her mind collecting impressions and storing them like pieces of a puzzle. The environment felt tense and unfamiliar, and she kept her eyes wide open, trying to make sense of the situation. No one asked her what she felt or thought. They only focused on moving her from one place to another. Emily remained silent in her wheelchair, holding on to the only thing she could control, observing everything around her. Vanessa entered the courtroom appearing calm and composed, wearing clothes chosen carefully to match the solemnity of the event. Her posture was straight, her steps measured, and her expression showed a controlled mix of sadness and indignation. She greeted people politely, accepted sympathetic glances, and acted as if she were the grieving widow seeking justice for her husband. Every gesture she made seemed calculated to reinforce the idea that she was strong, yet deeply wounded by the tragedy. She positioned herself where everyone could see her reactions, especially when Amanda was brought into the room. Whenever someone spoke about Jonathan, Vanessa lowered her head slowly or pressed her lips together, giving the impression she was struggling to hold back emotions. Her performance strengthened the narrative the public had already accepted, casting her as the victim and Amanda as the threat. She kept her voice soft when answering questions and looked distressed at the appropriate moments, making it easy for observers to believe she was only seeking the truth. Her composed presence contrasted sharply with Amanda's visible fear, shaping the courtroom atmosphere even before the session formally began. Amanda sat at the defense table, trembling and overwhelmed. She did not have the resources to hire well-known lawyers, so she depended on the public defender assigned to her case. Though the defender tried to help, Amanda felt the weight of not having a powerful legal team to counter the accusations made against her. Her fear intensified when she saw the prosecutors organizing their documents with confidence, as if they were certain the outcome would be in their favor. She tried to focus on her breathing, but the pressure inside her chest made every moment feel unbearable. Amanda wondered how she had gone from a loyal employee to someone sitting in a courtroom fighting for her freedom. She glanced around the room, hoping to find sympathy in someone's eyes, but most people avoided looking at her directly. The loneliness she felt was overwhelming. All she wanted was for someone to believe her, to see that she was innocent. But the courtroom felt like a place where her words would be drowned out by the accusations surrounding her. She sat quietly, waiting for the moment she would be asked to speak, terrified of being misunderstood again. During the hearing, the evidence presented against Amanda was surprisingly shallow, yet it was treated as if it were irrefutable. Prosecutors focused on Vanessa's detailed statements, portraying her as a credible witness who had suffered a great loss. They repeated her claims about Amanda's supposed resentment and odd behaviors, even though no one had ever noticed such things before Jonathan's death. They emphasized Amanda's access to the kitchen and the meals, suggesting that opportunity alone was enough to imply guilt. No deeper investigation was discussed, and no alternative scenarios were considered. Amanda listened, as each point was described as though it were a proven fact, even though the accusations relied mostly on assumptions and exaggerated interpretations. She felt her stomach twist as she realized how little truth mattered in the narrative being built around her. Her public defender tried to challenge some claims, but the prosecution spoke with confidence, dismissing every explanation Amanda had given. The imbalance in the courtroom became clear as the session went on, and Amanda felt increasingly powerless while watching her fate slip further out of her control. As the hearing continued, Amanda felt the weight of a looming sentence pressing down on her. Every word spoken by the prosecution carried the threat of a future she feared deeply, a future where she would be condemned for something she had never done. She fought back tears as she thought about her years of service, her dedication to Jonathan, and the care she had always given Emily. None of it seemed to matter now. The courtroom atmosphere made her feel as if she had been judged long before she stepped inside. She sensed that many in the room had already accepted the version of events shown in the media, and that her voice carried little influence compared to Vanessa's polished testimony. Emily watched quietly from a distance, unable to intervene even though she had seen things others had ignored. Amanda felt completely alone, trapped by a system that seemed determined to blame her. As the session moved toward its end, she understood that her future depended on people who had not truly listened to her. The fear of being unjustly punished settled deeply inside her, leaving her desperate for any sign that someone might finally see the truth. Emily spent the days inside the mansion quietly, but her mind was far from still. She replayed the events of the past weeks again and again, organizing them in a way only she could understand. Her memory worked like a collection of clear images, each one stored exactly as she had seen it. She remembered small details that most adults had ignored, fragments of conversations whispered in hallways, the way Vanessa moved around the house when no one else was watching, and the objects she handled near Jonathan's meals. Emily remembered seeing bottles hidden behind larger items on shelves, as if they were meant to stay out of sight. She also recalled the soft sound of a drawer opening late at night, followed by Vanessa placing something inside and locking it right away. These memories were not confusing to Emily. They were arranged in her mind with precision. While everyone else assumed she was too quiet or too distracted to notice anything, Emily had absorbed every detail. The absence of her father and the confusion in the house made her focus even more on what she had seen. Piece by piece, she began forming a picture that others had overlooked, but she still needed a way to express it. Although Emily rarely spoke clearly, she had a strong sense of direction and routine, and she used this to communicate in the only way she could. She began guiding her caregiver through the mansion without using words. Emily would tap the wheelchair arm or point faintly towards certain hallways, waiting for the caregiver to follow. When the woman hesitated, Emily insisted through repeated motions, moving her eyes towards specific doors or shelves. Her gestures were small but steady, showing a clear intention. The caregiver, unsure at first, eventually understood that Emily wanted to lead her somewhere important. They moved quietly through the mansion, passing rooms where the memory of Vanessa's actions still lingered in Emily's thoughts. The girl showed her the path, step by step, stopping only when they reached the places where she had once seen hidden items. She directed her attention toward drawers, cabinets, and corners that looked ordinary on the outside, but held secrets she remembered. The caregiver leaned in, opened the spaces Emily pointed at, and slowly began uncovering objects she had never seen before. Small bottles, containers, and items that seemed out of place. The caregiver's surprise grew as she carefully examined what Emily had led her to. She realized these objects should not have been where they were and certainly did not look harmless. Some bottles still held traces of substances she could not identify. Others were empty but had labels that raised concern. Packaging, crumpled inside locked drawers, matched what Emily had witnessed Vanessa hiding earlier. The discovery unsettled the caregiver enough to make her pause and reconsider everything she had assumed about the case. Emily watched her closely, waiting for a reaction. The caregiver realized that the girl had been trying to communicate something important all along, something that no one else had thought to ask her about. She gathered everything discreetly, placing the items into bags while ensuring no one saw her. She felt a growing sense of responsibility, understanding that these objects might change the direction of the entire investigation. Emily's silence was no longer a limitation. It had become a critical source of information. The caregiver took a moment to study Emily's face and noticed the seriousness in her expression. It was clear the child had been carrying the weight of these memories by herself, unable to express them until now. Understanding this, the caregiver gently reassured her with a calm voice and careful gestures, letting Emily know she had done the right thing. She then brought the items to a private area of the mansion to keep them hidden until she could figure out what to do next. The situation felt urgent but delicate. The caregiver knew she could not go directly to the authorities without risking the evidence being dismissed or misunderstood, especially given how the case had been handled so far. She needed someone who would take the information seriously, someone with enough knowledge to evaluate whether the items truly mattered. Emily stayed close during this process, her eyes following each movement. For the first time since Jonathan's death, she felt that someone was paying attention to what she was trying to show. The caregiver knew she could not delay taking the next step. After considering her options, the caregiver decided to contact a volunteer lawyer she knew, someone who occasionally helped families in complicated situations. She made the call quietly, explaining only that she had found items that might be relevant to the ongoing case and that she needed guidance. She avoided mentioning names, details, or accusations over the phone, fearing the information could reach the wrong ears. The lawyer agreed to come as discreetly as possible to examine what she had discovered. Emily observed this interaction quietly, but with clear awareness. The caregiver realized the girl understood more about the seriousness of the moment than she could express. The mansion remained tense and filled with uncertainty, but for the first time there was a sense of direction, as if a new path was forming, one guided by Emily's memories and the caregiver's willingness to listen. Both of them stayed cautious, knowing the situation had to be handled carefully. As the new information began circulating among the few people who were aware of it, the tone surrounding the case started to shift slightly. The volunteer lawyer reviewed the items and quickly recognized that they needed to be analyzed by professionals. He took photographs, documented their locations, and ensured that the objects were preserved in a way that would make them admissible if needed. Word spread quietly among people close to the situation, and whispers of doubt began to form. For the first time since the investigation started, Amanda was no longer the only focus. Some individuals began questioning whether the case had been pushed too quickly in one direction. Emily watched these changes unfold silently, her eyes following each conversation with careful attention. The atmosphere in the mansion remained tense, but now there was room for possibility, room for the truth to emerge from the details she had held so clearly in her mind. The courtroom grew tense when the volunteer lawyer entered, carrying a sealed box filled with the items recovered from the mansion. He walked with urgency, asking for the session to be paused because the evidence he had brought was too important to ignore. The judge, noticing the seriousness in his tone, allowed him to approach and present the materials. As he opened the box, the room filled with whispers. Inside were bottles and containers containing residue that matched the type of poison suspected in Jonathan's death. The judge ordered the items to be inspected immediately, and the clerk carried them to a nearby table for examination. Prosecutors exchanged confused glances, trying to understand how such significant evidence had surfaced so suddenly. Amanda, sitting silently beside her public defender, felt her chest tighten with a mixture of hope and disbelief. For the first time since the accusations began, someone had brought something that might prove her innocence. She watched the scene unfold, her hands shaking, barely able to comprehend that this discovery might finally shift the direction of the case. The courtroom, once filled with certainty about her guilt, now held an air of confusion and anticipation as everyone waited for the judge's reaction. Vanessa's reaction was immediate and dramatic. The moment the bottles were displayed, she widened her eyes and raised a hand to her face, acting shocked as if she had just learned something unthinkable. She loudly insisted she had no knowledge of the items and that she was horrified by their presence in the house. Her voice carried through the room, trembling in a way that seemed practiced. She claimed the evidence must have been planted or forgotten by someone else. But her dramatic reaction did not match the calm confidence she had shown earlier during the hearing, and the contrast caused a noticeable shift in the attention of those observing. People in the audience leaned forward, watching her carefully. The lawyers exchanged quiet comments, and even the judge studied Vanessa with a more skeptical expression. Vanessa continued speaking, insisting she was as shocked as everyone else, but her exaggerated tone only made her seem less believable. For the first time, the certainty that had surrounded her testimony began to weaken, and suspicion slowly shifted away from Amanda. The caregiver was called to the stand soon after, and she explained how Emily had guided her to the hidden places in the mansion. Her voice was steady but nervous as she told the judge that the child had insisted, through gestures and movements, that there were important objects stored in specific drawers and corners. She described following Emily's directions step by step and discovering the bottles exactly where the girl had indicated. The courtroom listened intently, aware that Emily's involvement added a new layer to the situation. The caregiver emphasized that she trusted the girl's memory because Emily had shown unusual accuracy in retracing her experiences. Her testimony brought something new to the case. the idea that the child had seen more than anyone realized. This revelation stirred uncertainty among the jurors and observers. The judge took notes carefully, recognizing that the new information had come from someone who had no personal reason to lie. The caregiver's words cast doubt on the earlier accusations against Amanda and challenged the narrative that Vanessa had built around herself. The tension in the courtroom increased as everyone sensed that the case was shifting. The judge then ordered that Emily be brought into the courtroom to clarify what she had observed. The assistants carefully guided her wheelchair into the room, and the entire audience turned their eyes toward the girl. Emily remained calm, though her eyes flicked from one person to another, absorbing the atmosphere. She looked small and fragile in the large courtroom, but her presence carried unexpected weight. The judge spoke to her slowly, making sure she understood she only needed to show what she had seen. Emily nodded lightly, signaling her readiness. The caregiver and the volunteer lawyer stayed close enough to reassure her, but did not interfere. The room fell quiet, giving Emily space to express herself. Everyone understood that her memory could be key to revealing the truth. Her wheelchair stopped in front of the judge's bench, and she observed the courtroom with careful attention, just as she had observed the mansion in the weeks before. The silence inside the room became almost heavy as the adults waited for her next move, unsure of how much she would reveal. Emily lifted her hand and pointed directly at Vanessa with surprising firmness. Her gesture was precise, not hesitant or confused. Then she began reproducing the movements she had witnessed weeks earlier. She mimicked someone pouring a substance into a cup, tapping the air as if mixing something. She made soft sounds that imitated the opening of bottles and the closing of drawers. The gestures were simple, but full of meaning, clear enough that anyone watching could understand what she was trying to communicate. The courtroom grew tense as each motion connected to the hidden items found in the mansion. Vanessa's face lost some of its practiced sadness, replaced by a flash of tension she could not hide. Emily continued her demonstration, repeating the same set of gestures to ensure everyone understood. She pointed again toward Vanessa, then toward the imaginary cup in her hands, recreating the scene she had witnessed with her father. The judge followed every movement with focused attention, realizing the child's memory was far more detailed and reliable than anyone had expected. The courtroom erupted in whispers as soon as Emily finished. People exchanged shocked glances, and the jurors shifted in their seats, clearly affected by the new revelation. The prosecution looked unsettled, flipping through their notes as if searching for a way to counter what had just happened. Amanda covered her mouth with shaking hands, tears filling her eyes as hope grew inside her for the first time since her arrest. Vanessa tried to regain her composure, insisting that Emily was confused and misunderstood what she had seen. But her voice no longer carried the same confidence, and her explanations seemed weak compared to the clear gestures the girl had displayed. The judge called for order, acknowledging that the new information would require immediate review. The atmosphere in the courtroom had changed completely. The certainty that once condemned Amanda was now replaced by doubt directed at Vanessa, whose behavior was no longer matching her earlier statements. Emily, seated quietly in her wheelchair, had done what no one else had been able to do. She brought the truth into the open, leaving the courtroom in a tense silence filled with questions that could no longer be ignored. The prosecution requested an immediate reassessment of the case as soon as the new evidence appeared. The judge agreed, announcing that all accusations against Amanda would be suspended until specialists finished examining the bottles taken from the mansion. Experts began analyzing the chemical residues inside the containers, comparing them to the traces of poison previously detected in Jonathan's body. Early reports suggested a strong compatibility, raising serious doubts about the original accusations. The courtroom atmosphere shifted completely. What had once seemed like a straightforward case now looked uncertain and unstable. Lawyers whispered among themselves, jurors exchanged uneasy glances, and reporters typed frantically as the judge ordered a temporary halt to the session. Amanda sat in silence, overwhelmed and struggling to process everything. For the first time since her arrest, she felt a small but honest sense of relief. She knew the truth had taken too long to be heard, but now it was finally being recognized. Meanwhile, Vanessa attempted to speak to the court, insisting that there must be some mistake or misunderstanding. Her voice shook as she tried to defend her version of events, but the attention in the room had already shifted away from her, and the certainty she once carried began to crumble. As Vanessa attempted to explain her innocence, the courtroom doors suddenly opened, and a wave of shock swept through the room. Jonathan entered, alive, supported by 2 security agents. His appearance stopped every voice mid-sentence. People rose from their seats, gasping, pointing, and whispering uncontrollably. The judge immediately demanded silence, banging her gavel to restore order. Amanda covered her mouth in disbelief, unable to understand how Jonathan was standing before her after being declared dead. Vanessa froze, her face draining of color as she stared at her husband. Journalists rushed to capture the moment, cameras clicking rapidly as chaos filled the courtroom. For a moment, the noise became overwhelming, but Jonathan raised a hand, asking everyone to calm down. His presence alone transformed the atmosphere, shifting the entire direction of the hearing in a single instant. The judge instructed him to approach the bench, and slowly, supported by the agents, he moved forward, ready to speak and explain what had truly happened. Jonathan faced the room and began explaining his shocking return. He told the court that he had grown suspicious of his wife's behavior in the weeks before his collapse. He described feeling increasingly ill, noticing that his symptoms worsened after certain meals. Without accusing anyone outright, he had quietly begun questioning the circumstances around him. Eventually, the evidence became too clear to ignore, and he feared that Emily might also be in danger. He confided in a small group of security agents and created a plan to fake his death temporarily. This allowed him to observe Vanessa's actions without revealing that he was still alive. He stayed hidden while medical professionals secretly monitored his condition and helped him recover from the poisoning. Jonathan made it clear that his decision had been driven by his desire to protect his daughter and confirm whether his suspicions were correct. As he spoke, the courtroom listened in stunned silence. The explanations matched the strange events that had unfolded in the mansion, and the tension in the room shifted entirely toward Vanessa. When Vanessa understood that her husband had known everything and had exposed her actions publicly, she broke down emotionally. Her composure vanished completely. She cried loudly, shaking her head and trying to deny what Jonathan revealed, but her words came out fragmented and desperate. She clutched the edge of the table, gasping for air as she realized that all her lies had collapsed in front of the entire court. Her exaggerated reactions, once convincing, now appeared empty and transparent. The judge watched her closely, maintaining strict order as security prepared to intervene if needed. Reporters documented every second, typing furiously while cameras focused on every expression on Vanessa's face. The courtroom no longer saw her as a grieving widow, but as someone whose actions had led to a man nearly losing his life and an innocent woman almost being condemned. Vanessa's collapse marked the final turning point, proving that the suspicions against Amanda had been misplaced from the start. Amanda could no longer hold back her emotions. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they came from relief rather than fear. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed openly as the judge declared her officially innocent. Every accusation against her was dismissed on the spot. The public defender moved closer to comfort her, recognizing how deeply she had suffered throughout the investigation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as people realized how unjustly Amanda had been treated. Her co-workers, who had been watching from the back, exchanged looks of remorse and shock. Emily, still in her wheelchair, watched the scene quietly, her eyes fixed on Amanda. She understood that something positive had finally happened and that her efforts to show the truth had not been ignored. The tension that had filled the courtroom for so long finally eased, replaced by a feeling of justice returning to the case. Amanda lifted her head slightly, wiping her tears, trying to breathe normally again. Every detail of the dramatic turn was recorded by the court. Judges, clerks, and officers documented the testimony, the evidence, and Jonathan's unexpected appearance. The sudden twist became an official part of the case, marked carefully in legal records that would remain permanent. Reporters rushed out of the courtroom to broadcast the news, spreading the story quickly through every available channel. The judge announced that a full investigation into Vanessa's actions would begin immediately, and Jonathan confirmed his cooperation. The courtroom slowly emptied as people tried to process what they had witnessed. Amanda remained seated for a moment longer, still overwhelmed by the truth finally being revealed. Emily's caregiver gently pushed her toward Amanda, giving them a moment of quiet connection in the center of the room. The long nightmare that Amanda had lived was finally ending, and a new chapter was beginning, one in which the truth had prevailed and those who had suffered were finally heard. Jonathan resumed his life in the mansion with a sense of relief and renewed purpose after Vanessa was arrested and formally charged with attempted murder and fraud. The threat that had surrounded him and Emily for weeks was finally gone, allowing him to focus again on the things that truly mattered. His first priority became reinforcing the protection and care he gave his daughter. He made sure Emily felt safe at all times, staying close to her throughout the day and creating a calm routine that helped her recover from the tension she had experienced. The difference in the atmosphere of the mansion was noticeable. The fear, confusion, and uncertainty that had once filled the halls finally faded. Jonathan spoke frequently with the staff, assuring them that stability had returned. He also worked closely with the authorities to finalize any details related to the case, determined to prevent anything similar from threatening his family again. Although he had gone through something traumatic, he felt grateful to be alive and able to care for his daughter, especially after realizing how much she had seen and understood during the ordeal. Amanda's role in the household changed significantly after the truth came to light. She was publicly thanked for her loyalty and for everything she had endured. Jonathan personally addressed the injustice she had suffered, making it clear she had always been a trusted and vital part of the family. He reinstated her position in the mansion with an increased salary and new privileges that reflected his gratitude. For Amanda, returning to the house brought a wave of emotion. She walked through the familiar rooms with a sense of relief, knowing she no longer had to fear suspicion or accusations. The staff welcomed her warmly, acknowledging the strength she had shown throughout the investigation. Her presence once again brought comfort to Emily, who reacted positively the moment she saw Amanda back in her routine. Amanda embraced her responsibilities with renewed energy, eager to help restore peace in the household. She felt valued in a way she never had before. As Jonathan made it clear, she was not just an employee, but an essential member of their family. Emily underwent medical and psychological evaluations after everything had ended. Specialists were impressed by her exceptional observational skills and her ability to remember details with accuracy. They praised her capacity to recognize important patterns and communicate them in her own way. These evaluations helped Jonathan understand just how deeply Emily had perceived the events happening around her, even without using many words. He felt proud of her strength and relieved that she had finally been acknowledged for her intelligence. Emily's improvement was gradual but visible. With the danger gone, she responded better to therapy sessions, and she showed more comfort in her daily activities. Her caregivers adjusted her routines to give her space to relax and recover emotionally. The people around her learned to trust her quiet nature even more, knowing she had played a crucial role in revealing the truth. Emily's confidence slowly grew as she recognized that the adults around her were paying attention to her signals, something that made her feel more secure. The mansion itself was reorganized as part of a symbolic and practical effort to erase the negative memories left behind. Jonathan oversaw this process carefully. He instructed the staff to remove all items associated with the trauma, including anything connected to Vanessa. These objects were taken away to prevent Emily, or anyone else, from being reminded of the difficult period they had endured. The house underwent a subtle transformation, with rooms rearranged and new safety measures installed. Security systems were updated, and stricter protocols were put in place to protect everyone living there. Jonathan wanted the mansion to be a place of stability and healing. With the staff working together, the home began to feel restored, no longer carrying the heavy atmosphere that had lingered for so long. Each cleaned corner and reorganized space helped the family move forward from the tragedy, turning the mansion back into the peaceful environment it had once been. Jonathan became more present in Emily's daily life. He dedicated time each day to activities they could enjoy together, such as simple games, reading, or quiet walks through the garden. These moments strengthened their bond and reassured Emily that her father would always be by her side. He also began planning new projects for their future, envisioning ways to improve her therapies, expand her education, and create a life filled with stability and happiness. Without the pressure of hiding or fearing for their safety, Jonathan could finally make long-term plans again. He felt hopeful, imagining a future where Emily could continue growing in a safe environment surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her. Every small step they took together became a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything, and how fortunate they were to have escaped it. Peace returned to the mansion as the days passed, settling into every hallway and room that had once felt heavy with tension. The staff returned to their normal routines, now strengthened by a sense of unity. Amanda worked with renewed confidence, and Emily showed clearer signs of comfort and trust. Jonathan moved through the house with a calmer expression, ready to rebuild the life that had been shaken so deeply. The bonds between them grew stronger, shaped by the challenges they had faced together. The trauma had left marks, but it had also revealed the loyalty and courage within the family. As the household returned to its peaceful rhythm, it became clear that a difficult chapter had ended and a new one had begun, one defined by trust, safety, and the promise of a more stable future. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.